Hello everyone, dear friends. You are on the Military Reporter channel. Let's get to the review of events. Let's start with Kursk region. What can I say? None of the maps record any special changes. By and large, nothing significant is happening. However, American maps show some successes of Russian troops in the Basov area, here. In other words, Russian troops are not abandoning their attempts to advance to this road, the road that supplies the Ukrainian bridgehead. According to Zelensky's statements, Ukrainian troops will stay at least in the southern part of this bridgehead for as long as possible, because, according to him, there are dominant heights here. How they will do it, time will tell. Let's go further south, to the Belgorod region. You know, yesterday I wanted to close this topic, but in fact it is impossible, because there is a serious attempt by Ukrainian troops to break through in the Belgorod region. Ukrainian maps don't show anything about it, Russian maps have contradictory information. So let's look at the American map. If we believe this source, the Ukrainian troops managed to break through the border of the Russian Federation in a fairly wide area, about 10 kilometers, and in some places even to a depth of 3 kilometers. There is persistent fighting and clashes. Do you see these defensive structures? It feels like Ukraine has actually managed to break through and develop an offensive in some parts of Belgorod Oblast. As the Institute for the Study of War notes, this information has not yet been confirmed. But this is the most complete information I can see at all. What stresses me out the most is the behavior of Ukrainian columnists. They behave exactly the same way they did at the beginning of the Kursk operation. They talk about some small border battles and clashes. Of course, I do not believe that this will develop into some serious breakthrough with the capture of district centers, Pyatiraka, and so on. But nevertheless, the fact that something is happening here is a fact. We'll keep an eye on the news. Now about the Volchansk direction. None of the maps record the advance of Russian troops or any other troops, but it is noted that there is fierce fighting in the area of Volchansk here. Also, to the west of this bridgehead, in Kharkiv Oblast, there is an intensification of fighting in the Liptsev area. Attempts by Russian troops to break through the AFU defenses are being recorded somewhere around here, but the results are not yet clear. No information on Kupiansk direction, no information on Limansk either. That's why we're going straight to Chasov Yar. There is interesting information here. As Russian sources note, Russian Federation troops have managed to extend their advance in the northwest of this city to a fairly serious distance. These northwestern areas have come completely under the control of the Russian Federation armed forces. In addition, this information is confirmed by the Institute for the Study of War, which records the advance of Russian troops in this area over the past 24 hours. So, what do we have in Toretsk? There is information and from American sources, which notes a significant advance of Russian troops not in Toretsk itself, but on the flanks, in the area of Severnoy and Druzhba here. In addition, the Americans report that Leonidovka has almost completely fallen under Russian control, and the offensive there continues to develop. The plan here is obvious: good old-fashioned flanking strikes, flanking Toretsk and then destroying or pushing Ukrainian forces out of that city. Let's move on to the Pokrovsk direction. Alarming information, my friends, which is confirmed by Russian sources. The Ukrainian forces have managed to seize this transportation hub. This is indeed a very important logistical route for the Ukrainian armed forces. I don't know to what extent the Ukrainian forces will be able to use this junction effectively, because it is under constant fire control. The overpass itself has been blown up, but nevertheless, there is very serious fighting over this fork, and all this is happening on the eastern flank of the Myrnograd-Pokrovsky direction. Let's take a look at the Kurakovskoy direction ***. There is no new information here. But even the Ukrainian resource state records successes of the Russian army in the Velikonovosylovsky direction, in the area of Skudnoy. This is the advance of Russian troops north of Velika Novosayolka and in the area of Novosayolka, east of Velika Novosayolka. So there is an offensive developing here in basically all directions. Velikaya Novosayolka has been in the rear for a long time. Now to the Zaporizhzhia direction ***. You know, there is no special news from here. For the last 3 to 4 days there was promising news about the intensification of fighting in this area, and even quite successful. But now the front is frozen again. As Ukrainian map observers note, the Russian army makes about 120 attempts to break through Ukrainian positions per day. Let me remind you that at the beginning of the month this figure dropped to about 6 per day. In general, everything is as usual on the fronts. The only thing that is really alarming *** is this section of the Russian-Ukrainian border. Yes, right here, something clearly not good is happening in the area of Mariinka, Grafovka and Demidovka. Let's think about where Ukrainian troops might break through if they succeed. The map clearly shows Grafovka and the road. If they take Grafovka and get to this road, the way to Tulin and Kosheri opens up. That appears to be some kind of district center. In general, there's nothing particularly interesting here, no nuclear power plants, regional centers or anything like that. Perhaps it's just an attempt to distract Russian troops. Plus, of course, it's a good information occasion, especially if the breakthrough turns out to be more successful than the Russian side would like. Meanwhile, new information is coming in from the fronts. In recent hours there has been an increase in the activity of Russian troops in a number of directions, which may indicate that they are preparing for another phase of the offensive. In the area of Toretsk, Russian forces continue to put pressure on the Ukrainian defense. After the capture of Leonidovka, there has been a buildup of strikes on the flanks towards Severnoye and Druzhba. According to U.S. sources, Russian troops are trying to gain a foothold in new positions and create conditions for further encirclement of Toretsk. The situation remains tense. Ukrainian troops are pulling in reserves and trying to stabilize the front line. However, the successes of the Russian troops on the flanks create a threat of operational encirclement of the Ukrainian forces in Toretsk, which may lead to serious losses for the Ukrainian armed forces. Fierce fighting for control over the key transportation hub continues in the Pokrovsky direction. Russian troops are trying to break through the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses and gain a foothold in advantageous positions. Recent reports indicate that additional forces are being transferred from Ukraine to hold their positions. However, there is still a high threat of losing control over this junction, which could seriously complicate the Ukrainian army's logistics in this section of the front. The Russian army is increasing pressure in the Kurakov direction. In the area of Velika Novosayolka, Russian forces continue to advance from 2 directions, from the north and from the east. This poses a threat of operational encirclement of the Ukrainian forces in this area. If the Russian forces manage to close the pincers, the Ukrainian forces will find themselves in a difficult position with limited maneuver and supply possibilities. In such a situation, there is a high probability that Ukrainian units will be forced to retreat or become encircled. There is a relative calm in the Zaporizhzhia direction, but there are reports of Russian forces regrouping. According to information from the battlefield, Russian forces are conducting artillery training and reconnaissance, which may indicate preparations for a new phase of the offensive. If the Russian army manages to break through the Ukrainian defenses in this area, it will open the way to Orkhov and further to strategically important facilities deep inside Ukrainian territory. This will jeopardize the entire Ukrainian armed forces defense system in the south. The situation on the border in Belgorod Oblast remains unstable. Russian forces are trying to contain the breakthrough of Ukrainian troops, which continue active operations in the border areas. According to the latest reports, fighting is taking place near Grafovka and Demidovka. If the Ukrainian forces manage to gain a foothold in the new positions, this will create serious problems for the Russian side and will require the transfer of additional reserves. In the Toretsk direction ***, if the Russian forces manage to gain a foothold on the flanks and develop their offensive, there is a high probability of encirclement of the Ukrainian forces in Toretsk. In the Pokrovsk direction ***, control over the transport hub will give the Russian forces a strategic advantage and allow them to advance deep into the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses. In the Kurakovsky direction ***, Encirclement of Ukrainian forces near Velika and Novosayolka will be a serious blow to Ukraine's defense on the southern front. In the Zaporizhia direction a possible breakthrough will open the way to Orkhov and deepen the strategic pressure on the Ukrainian army in the south. In Belgorod Oblast holding positions becomes critical for the security of Russian border territories. Friends, the situation remains extremely tense and dynamic. We are following the developments in real time. Subscribe to the channel, put likes and follow the updates on the channel. Peace everyone and take care of yourselves.